What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Ally in Hand, and in this one we're taking a look at the First Descendant here, and we're not going to go too crazy. I'm mostly going to focus on 20 watts here, but we will talk about 25 a bit. We're going to take a look at 1080p, 900p, and 720p. So let's take a look at performance for the First Descendant here on the ROG Ally. For settings, I'm pretty much just on the low preset. We're gonna bounce back and forth with AMD's FSR and frame gen here in a bit, and medium on anti-aliasing. Now you can start to bump some stuff up to medium, especially when using frame gen, but I was having a lot of bad luck with that, with losing FPS and issues. I know sometimes there's better balancing there, but low's kind of where I had to stick with. Now we'll start off at 1080p, but again, we're also going to take a look at some of the other resolutions here real quickly with 720p and 900p as well. So let's get into it, starting off with 1080p. Now, when you come into the first kind of like social hub zone here in Albion, we are on those low/medium anti-aliasing. FSR is off, so we're at native 1080p here, running around in the 30s or so here. This place can get actually a little janky sometimes when it comes to performance, and it kind of varies depending on which direction you're looking, to be honest. But just kind of hanging around here, we can get an idea of what we're getting here around the social hub. Now, as far as wattage goes, I'm pretty much sticking with 20 watts for the video and for the game. Going to 25 gains us 2 to 3 watts typically, depending on what I'm doing, and for the battery drain, for me, wasn't worth it. A couple of scenes here, again, like 34 FPS goes to 37 FPS if we go from the 20 to the 25. If you have areas where you need to push a little bit, you certainly can gain a little, but it's not a lot. Same thing here. We'll settle in around 43 FPS, and then we'll switch over to 25 watts, and we're going to be, what, 46 to 47, 46. So yeah, 2 to 3 FPS depending for that 5 watts. So for this, just to see performance, I'm sticking with the 20. Now back into the social hub area here, we can switch over and turn frame gen on, which is going to use AMD FSR quality here for what I'm doing. So we'll turn this on. I already have frame gen on down here, and you'll see our frame rate boost up there. Now, I will say, for the most part, except when from time to time it breaks the game, frame gen works pretty well in here. You're always going to notice the loss of quality. I'm not a big fan of whatever version FSR they have in here. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's been the best. Maybe it's been improved since the last update, but frame gen certainly does help if you're someone who likes to run that. You're always going to notice the quality difference. You're always going to feel a little bit of that input lag or latency from time to time. Going down from frame gen to just FSR quality, you get about 40 FPS or so from that 60 something there. And then if we take and go all the way down to native 1080p again here, we'll come down to about 35, 36. So 4 difference for just FSR, and then of course quite a big difference if we turn on frame gen, just to get a general idea here so you can see how that's performing. So let's get moving here, and we'll take a look at a couple of different scenes as well. I'm having a pretty good time with the game. I'm definitely reading about plenty of the issues the game has as well, especially as you get farther in. But I was about 8 hours in when I was recording this, and I'm about 15 hours in now when I got to editing this thing, and I'm still having a lot of fun with it, but I'm more casually in and out, enjoying the game, hopping into some groups, and checking out performance on all the different handhelds, really, from the Go to the Ally to the Steam Deck, and playing on GeForce now for cloud as well. Now in this area, we're going to bump up from the 30s to the 50s, maybe hit 60 when we turn frame gen on and we don't change anything else. And ultimately, I think it feels pretty good. I said the same thing on the Legion Go, that 1200p with frame gen, when it wasn't breaking or having issues, actually felt pretty good. But it's going to depend on if you're the type of person that wants to run that or not. But I noticed jumping around to different areas of the game, the performance was pretty consistent whether I was going native or using frame gen or whatever, and it didn't change a whole lot. Some areas are certainly easier to run than others by a few FPS here or there, and some areas are tougher where we might come under 30 FPS at native or stay over like we are here. But ultimately, I think you can get a general idea of what's going on here with performance for 1080p on the ROG Ally. Now, I do want to take a quick look at the 720p and 900p just to get a little bit of an idea of what they're doing for you here on the First Descendant. So let's go ahead and switch over, and we'll start with 720p here. So same social area in Albion here, 720p. We're going to go from that 35 or so to 40s here, and then when we get over near the edge here in this spot, we were getting about 55 to 60 with frame gen at 1080p, but at native 720p here, we can get almost that without the frame gen. So that's something to think about depending on how you want to run the game for resolution. If we click frame gen on, we'll go all the way up to 90 to 92 FPS in this area versus the 60 or so FPS. We would get it to 1080 with frame gen on. So there's the difference from 720 there. And in this area at 1080p, we're getting about 30 to 38 FPS, and we're up there typically in the 40s for 720p here when it comes to the native resolution. So if you want to go just lower resolution in general, not worry about frame gen with 1080p because of the FPS, it works pretty well that way for me here. You're going to see the 720p versus the 1080p difference, but on the smaller 7-inch screen on the Ally, it's really not that bad. And in this area, when we turn on frame gen, FSR quality here, we're going to jump up into the 70s, the 80s. And again, just like 1080p, I felt like this felt pretty good, especially when you're on the Ally screen getting VRR. When I'm capped like this to my capture card, it doesn't necessarily do it justice in comparison to on the Ally, but this is how I was recording everything for this and for some future comparisons. But yeah, ultimately pretty good performance here, 1080p or 720p depending on what you want to get out of the game. Are you someone who even wants to mess with frame gen or not? Of course will depend. Now jumping over to some 900p real quick here, same social area. Of course, this is just going to be performance that's in between 1080p and 720p. So what you've seen already, everywhere I go in the game is just going to be performance that falls in between those two things typically for me here. So just like this area here, we're in between what the 1080 and the 720 was doing. If we turn on frame gen, same thing. 1080 was 60, 720 was 91. Here at 900p with frame gen, we're 78 FPS in that same area. So again, performance that just falls in between what we're getting for those two. So it's a nice sweet spot as well, but it just depends on if you're someone trying to stay above 40 FPS at native, you have a better chance of that at 720p. But if you're going to use frame gen, 1080p or 900p, probably the better way to go there, because at 720 you do get more with the upscaling of FSR and frame gen and all that. You're going to notice the image quality more. But I think there's a lot of room here depending on how you want to be able to run the game, be it 1080, 720 or 900p. Find you something decent between those low and medium settings. I was really having trouble pushing anything to medium without losing performance in this game. So even without the GPU saying 100%, it was just giving me issues with pushing more out of it or trying to balance some GPU settings versus CPU settings. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much going to do it for the First Descendant here on the ROG Ally. A pretty quick look at all those different resolutions at 20 watts just to see what that performance was like. All right, guys, thanks a lot for coming and check out the video. As always, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.